I love Halloween.
Yeah,
you know I love Naked Gun.
Right.
We got the 2 lead actors in those films.
Right. Take them together.
Jammed in.
It's almost like, hey, you got Leslie Nielsen? Yeah. You got something from Halloween? Yeah. All right, we got a movie.
Pop them together. One of Leslie Nielsen's last serious film roles, and a string of movies ripping off Halloween with one of the very actors.
But don't blink,
Halloween.
then you might miss them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So join us as we get all dolled up for prom night. And welcome back to the show. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks for watching. Thanks for finding us. And for our loyal fans, thank you for continuing to support the show. You can follow the show. Hey, we're on Twitter and on Instagram. Check out that Patreon for some great ideas to tell us what to do. Today we're going to talk about an early 80s slasher movie from Canada. Canada did a handful of slasher movies very in the early 80s, and this is one of their signature ones.
Prom Night.
Prom Night.
Hamilton High School students Kelly, Jude, Wendy, and Nick all have a deadly secret. 6 years ago, they picked on and accidentally caused the death of 10-year-old Robin Hammond. Now, as the teens prepare for high school prom, a masked killer is stalking them, out for vengeance. All right,
so this is really weird because I think the copy we had at the video store did not start with the abandoned warehouse scene. I think the copy we had just started with the phone calls.
It could have been the television edit, maybe. I know there was a different television edit.
So I think you be careful when you watch this movie. I think Shudder has the full version, which has the kids playing in the abandoned warehouse. But you know it's not going to be good. If it's an abandoned asylum or anything, you know it's not going to be good.
This is an instance where I have 2 copies of this movie on DVD, and I checked out both. And they're both pretty similar, but I just wanted to see if they
this is really weird because I watched this many times, but the movie started with the phone calls, and then they didn't have the shot of the kids. They just started with, But there's a lot of open-ended questions to this movie as we go because there's not a lot of closure or not a lot of reasons for the excuses, and as well as this is kind of one of those things where you could be at 2 camps. When people had arguments of what do you like, Strawberry Shortcake or Rainbow Bright? The already G.I. Joe Transformers. I'm more Terror Train than Prom Night, which is kind of like the same thing came out at the same time with Jamie Lee Curtis and both slasher movies from Canada. Yeah. But are you a Terror Train or Prom Night?
I've never seen Terror Train, so
I'll
be honest with you that
maybe next week.
Maybe next time.
Maybe next week.
Let me say this about Prom Night. I used to watch this movie as a kid a lot with my family. It was not as prevalent as Halloween in our household, but it was one of those ones where when we saw it on TV, we stopped what we were doing and watched it.
Okay.
I remembered virtually none of the movie. I remembered Leslie Nielsen was in it, very little bit, and I knew Jamie Lee Curtis was in it, and I think I remembered the ending more or less.
Yeah, we'll get back to the ending a little bit.
It's one of those things that I had very little memory of it, but I was like, I gotta watch this thing. We gotta check it out and revisit it. Sure. And let me just say it's a bad movie. Yeah. I think I see it through like rose-tinted glasses. It's like an.
And they do that in the movie with Leslie Nielsen, like Vaseline the lens almost.
Yeah. And I think that's how I view it. But it's kind of like when we talked about, you'd brought up a couple of film noir movies that we've talked about on the show before, where it's like, I don't know if I'm just remembering it better than it was. And there was a few that we watched, we were like, yeah, this isn't so great, And that's kind of how this is on the same camp of horror, where it's like, there's a part of me that loves this movie. It's a bad movie, though.
Oh, yeah, because it does the cardinal sin of being boring.
It's boring. And I think the biggest part I have is I get lost. I get lost watching this movie. I don't know who those kids are at the beginning and how they connect with the teenagers. Like, they don't really do much connecting in the story of those teenagers. I did this thing where I actually took notes watching the movie and I wrote down the character names so when I saw them I could make that connection. But you get lost in it. There's so many subplots that don't go anywhere.
Killer's gonna get you.
Yeah.
Killer, yeah.
It's just a lot going on that just was like, oh man, this is
the children's game doesn't make a whole lot of sense, I don't know, but children's games don't. Yeah. How do they all get there? They don't explain how the hell they all get there because did they bike over there? Did the parents drop them off, go play there?
Yeah, they run away, don't they? At the end, I don't think they run away.
They don't explain how all of a sudden the killer doesn't really not present at the end, but all of a sudden, oh, by the way, I was there. Yeah, and I saw this. They dance around this theme of broken glass that just doesn't. It seems forced in there. We talk about little tropes can be good parts of movies, and it begins with the movie of look at this broken glass, and all of a sudden the broken mirror, and the broken mirror piece is missing, and that's just like, what?
Yeah, it's a. I don't want to say it's a symbol because I don't really know what it's symbolizing, but it's a symbol of broken childhood. I don't know.
Right? Yeah, but it's just like broken glass is prominent in the movie, or it's just it doesn't make a lot of sense. Of you projected a person that is the killer has a broken personality.
Yeah.
Something like they did in Red Dragon, where he doesn't want to see himself unless the mirror is broken. That kind of fits, but this is just almost like, oh yeah, we need glass. Just throw broken glass in the movie.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that there is probably a good movie in here. I do think there is. It was shot initially it got a PG rating, and so they actually shot more gore, heavily like put more gore in there because the studio didn't want
the
a
kills
PG
off
movie.
camera. A lot of the killings is off camera.
And wasn't I believe someone had made the comparison to Terror Train by saying that Terror Train wasn't a very bloody movie. Like it's and it succeeded being very like PG, whereas this film succeeded in trying to push that R rating. The R rating stuff is maybe the most memorable stuff in the movie. I don't know.
Right? Yeah. It's just very like a lot of the dialogue. I mean, obviously, what's working for it is you go back and look for it as nostalgia, and I think that's what you like about it. It's nostalgia. I look back and like, oh my, that's what people dressed like. I was still an infant in the disco era. This is kind of disco era trailing off.
Yeah, I think it was Gene Siskel who said that this was a ripoff of either Friday the 13th or Halloween by way of Carrie. And I see exactly what he's saying.
I would say it's a ripoff of Halloween, Friday the 13th by way of Saturday Night Fever.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
because the prom stuff does work for me in terms of like an actual like prom story. I did find it like it felt very reminiscent of how we view the time in our minds and how we see it. It had the same kind of style I would have expected in a movie, and it did feel very Carrie-like at the prom scenes because they did the same thing in kind of Carrie, where they had this kind of like Vaseline lens kind of pristine quality of the last moments.
And they do like a little bit of Motel L with the head just missing on that, right? Yeah. So it's a lot about, you recognize a lot of things in the movie, but it takes its time, and you have not a lot of things. I mean, obviously you don't have a lot of kills in Scream, but you have a very interesting intro. Yeah. And then you get your story a little bit, but there's tension as you're doing it. This is just like, oh, there's murders, but all of a sudden we're back to high school and kids are acting like they're in high school.
This movie makes the mistake of thinking that more killing in a movie is entertaining, whereas like, okay, you bring up Scream. Yeah. Scream would work just as well if people didn't get stabbed at the end of the stalking moment. Scream is a stalker movie. Like, it is very much a stalking, like that's where the tension comes from, that's where the thrills come from. Like, Scream is a boring killer. He stabs you at the end. And it's like, oh, okay. Like, there's nothing really like grandiose about it. That's the stalking that wins. This movie really like goes for like, well, if we just kill more people
and don't do it very interesting. You just like hold her head up and like you just hear it. You're like, oh, I'm dead.
And I wonder if that may have been like a reshot because they had a PG version of it maybe, and they were like, we got to put a little bit more blood in there. And I remember the head thing actually more than anything else because when I was a kid I used to rent horror movie making books. Yeah, I used to rent these books from the library. There was a horror section where you could find horror filmmaking books. Right, I saw things like old Hammer film images. I saw like Godzilla stuff. I read about all the Universal monsters through that. And I remember there was a thing in like a slasher book that I had. Why did my parents let me check this stuff out? But I saw that head and I was like, oh, it's
gotta be good.
What is this movie? And that's when I remember watching Prom Nights.
The best thing about this movie is what Leslie Nielsen's for like total of 10 minutes. He's the principal.
He's the star.
He's the star. He gets star rating before Jamie Lee Curtis.
It's interesting to note that he's the top
billing
actor. And he maybe has less time than the captain he plays in Poseidon Adventure, who gets killed when the Poseidon becomes an adventure.
Yeah, he's the skipper in Poseidon Adventure, and he dies. He's got more time, and yeah. He's the principal, but you don't see him at school really yet either. They're walking into school.
And that's
it's very obviously a Sunday morning when they go to school because
But he's the principal and he's the dad, and I didn't really feel like he was either of those. Like enough to make it make sense in the script. The script is just riddled with these like not inconsistencies as much as just kind of unbuilding. There's nothing in there.
Where the hell the parents? Yeah. I mean, the whole movie is like, where the hell the parents? Parents did a horrible job. Maybe these kids don't have any parents. But yeah, and then you got the groundskeeper for the school, and they try to like do this. They always do this movie. The Prowler did this movie. He could be it. He's weird. He could be the killer, and he's not. You're like, oh no, he never was the whole time. Yeah. Which I'd get a chuckle out of.
And kind of not remembering all the details. I was trying to think if he
Final
was
Exam
the
did
killer.
That too, right?
And it's funny because he's one of Cronenberg's regular actors from early on in his career playing the groundskeeper. And I was like, well, he was in some Cronenberg horror, so like maybe he I'm trying to like kind of suss out things about it too. Yeah. But it's a movie that every aspect about it that's even okay or good is better in another movie.
Yes.
So you've got Jamie Lee Curtis here. Well, there's a better Jamie Lee Curtis horror movie. There's a few. You've got a Prom Night Disaster. There's a better Prom Night Disaster movie. There's
I would say, even though I Know What You Did Last Summer, which is kind of almost a remake.
That feels very reminiscent of this. That's actually more tied to Prom Night than the Prom Night remake was. It's more tied to Prom Night than the adaptation of the book that
or the sequel, Prom Night 2, which is probably a better movie.
So that's what I was interested about too, because now I hunted down all 4 Prom Night movies.
Oh my God, there's 4.
I had to hunt. Yeah, those last 2 are tough to find, man. I hunted those down, and this actually has a very similar trajectory to the Universal Mummy series, where the first film is unrelated to any of the sequels. The first Mummy movie, there's not the guy in bandages in that Universal Mummy. It's just Boris Karloff.
It's Boris Karloff in like a.
But the second movie is where they actually have the guy in the wraps, and that's the character that continues in all the sequels. So this is very similar to that, whereas like we get a slasher movie here, and then we get a ghost story in Prom Night 2 that carries over to 3 and kind of into 4. The interesting thing is Hamilton High School is the only thing that's in all 4 movies. And what's the guy's name? Brock Simpson is an actor who appears in all 4 films, but he plays a different character in all 4 films.
Oh, that's fun. I mean, that's kind of the fun of
It's wild. It reminds me of Silent Night, Deadly Night. That was a series of 5 movies, and I think it was like Clint Howard appeared in like 3 of them as a different character. So it's kind of this like almost anthology style weirdness.
So I think if you're interested in checking out, because it's part of the slasher collection,
it's an important piece of history.
Of like, especially when Canada in the early '80s were like financing. It's really weird. The government was financing these movies and kicking them out. So there's a handful of them, and they all have a kind of a tight formula. They're all in Canada. They're in the winter and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, what's working for it is what's interesting is kind of the nostalgia. You just look at how people dressed, how the music and everything, and killing aspects.
It works as a time capsule.
And it's so Canadian. Like, we want to make this TV friendly, so let's not be too gory. And then they go, no, you have to go gory enough. Okay,
well, that kind of served it well then, because now you have a TV cut and you have a regular cut. It was like when I remember when Halloween 2 was being filmed, they went and ordered some extra scenes to be shot for the original Halloween so that they could air it on television in time for Halloween 2.
And I told them
it's not insane.
And I told them in the early '80s you would see Halloween 2 on Halloween. You will never see Halloween 1. It was always part 2 at the I always saw it was the scary movie in the hospital. That's what I.
Well, that's why people confuse those 2 movies though, is because they shot extra scenes for the first Halloween that looked like they were in the second Halloween.
Hilarious.
And then they like connect the dots more, and it's kind of nice to actually have a TV version of the movie, but it makes it weird because then as a kid, I remember thinking, well, I've seen the TV version of Prom Night, but there's an R-rated movie. I got to go find that. And so that was where like my movie collecting kind of was jumped into high gear, because it was like, well, I don't want to watch just the TV version. I got to see the good stuff, And it causes you as a film fan to go hunt down these like, I guess, rare cuts when you're 10. I don't know.
So I get a kick out of it because how I relate personally. It's nostalgia, and it's it's fascinating about the cars. The one who has a Corvette. Wow, she has a really nice Corvette. I don't know how she afforded that. And then this Nelson Muntz from The Simpsons, has a van.
Yep.
And they go in the woods, and that's going to be good.
It's kind of like the group of teenagers is so like you don't understand why they're all still friends, but that's kind of what high school is. Is like you friends with the people that you know more than the people that you relate with. It's almost the amount of things that they don't have in common with each other is so similar to a movie like Return of the Living Dead, where you've got these like punk characters, and then you have like the nerd.
I mean, you understand why they're together in Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, those are kids who have like a actual connection. You understand why they're friends.
And the kid in the wheelchair is the jerk, and you're like putting up with it because you feel bad he's in the wheelchair, but then.
Yeah.
And when he gets in the chest, you're like, yeah!
Yeah, it's kind of like the 70s and 80s, I feel like we were putting together the pieces of what would be called the modern slasher, like the classic slasher formula. And so you see where this one did well, and you see where it stumbles a bit too. And it's a lot of things. And what I find funny is that the film didn't get financing until Jamie Lee Curtis was attached as the lead star. I believe Eve Plum from the Brady Bunch was cast as the lead. And then
that would have been interesting. That would have been good because she's the middle kid.
Well, yeah, I mean, they would have asked her who the killer is, and she said Marsha. But it's like they got her involved. And the funny thing is, Jamie Lee Curtis had to audition hard for this. Like, they tested her hard. They put her in. They had made her do readings again and again. They made her try the stunts. She did her own stunts in this movie. Like, she worked really hard to get in this cheap knockoff of a movie she already did.
Yeah. And there's a pain in the butt guy. Pain in the butt. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, of course there has to be.
It has to be a guy he's just an ass, right? He's like almost like Josh Brolin in Night Watch, ass.
Yeah, I mean,
Right,
I think
just yeah.
that's part of the charm too. Is you always want to have the one guy that you want to see go down, and then you play with us about how long we have to sit with him, which I think was done to perfection in the Friday the 13th remake.
He almost looks like
the
the brother of the bad guy, the Wraith, with Charlie Sheen. He does. Have you ever seen that movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, he almost looks like the bad guy, which is a really pain in the ass bad guy.
Yep.
Yeah, almost like the little stepbrother. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to, I guess, we're deep enough into this episode that I can say, spoiler alert, Jamie Lee Curtis has really bad luck with brothers. I couldn't stop thinking about that in this movie. She, like...
Oh my God.
So, I mean, like, of course, like, the murder brothers,
yeah,
but then you even see, like, recent stuff, like Knives Out, she's got siblings that are jerkbags.
And then
so,
she
like,
pretends in Fish Called Wanda that Kevin is her brother.
She's just not doing great things
But
with the brother
it's
world.
a fake... It's a scam part of that, right?
But
yeah.
speaking of going back to Halloween with this too, I guess this is a rumor, so don't take this with a grain of salt. I had read somewhere that a Michael Myers cameo was shot for this movie. That was not used.
Like he's on that street or something.
Yeah, it wasn't ended up in the finished film, and I'm very curious. I want to see that footage. I'm sure it doesn't exist anymore.
I bet the lawyers would like.
Yeah, I'm sure they shot it like knowing full well they weren't going to get the ability to actually use it. But it's a very odd choice to make, and seeing the connections again. We're ripping off Halloween, so we should put the character in the movie.
Yeah, it's almost like we talked about with Dead Snow. They're making this movie like, well, because Hollywood tells us we have to do this.
Yeah.
It's almost like they do that, but they do it so awkwardly.
Yeah.
We're so deep into this, we have to talk about the ending, because it's so bizarre, there's not a lot of closure. So what I get, and I don't think it's established, I think they're actually twins. Because
they are, yes.
Okay.
That's in the script, but it was cut from what I read.
Okay, all right. So they had to be twins, but then he puts like lipstick on, so it's almost like he has a sexual identity problem. Which in the '80s they think, well, that's why he's so messed up.
Yeah, that was a problem now where it's become so noticeable. Like if you have a character who has like dealing with their identity, they obviously have to be the killer. And it's like now when you do it now in a movie, just as a storytelling thing, it's connected to this like tripe, you know?
Right. So if you have like sexual identity problem, but nowadays it looked like when I watch it, this movie's over 40 years old. Maybe that he misses his sister that he tries to dress up. They're trying to almost like Psycho a little bit, but they don't really go that far.
Yeah.
Maybe they go that far, it'd be far more interesting, you know. But they don't like summer camp sleepaway or something like that. But they try to dance around that he's got identity problems and he wants to massacre. But it's all the movie's about revenge, so it just there's not a lot of answers.
It's and like when you get to this reveal, and again that's where my biggest problem with the movie comes in. Where it's like they don't give us enough time reckoning with these teenage versions of these kids. So like even like the killer reveal, I had to be like, wait, who is that? Like, and where are they in relation to the story? And then the movie's just done. Like you get no time to like reckon with what happened. It's so frustrating because again, like I say it, there is a good movie in here. There is. It's just behind layers of confusion.
Right.
You know, it's
like an offshoot of maybe somebody watched it and is like, well, let's do something better. I mean, it makes the Prowler look like a masterpiece because the kills are fun.
I criticize the Prowler, I criticize
the
burning, but I will also say, as much as I like have the nostalgia for this movie, this is worse than both of those movies.
Yes.
You know, again, there's good movies in all three of those. There's bits and pieces that work really well, but these are all movies that struggle too with kind of like, what do we focus on? Like the Burning and the Prowler, great with the gore effects, but they both kind of struggle with some of those character beats. But this is a film that builds up a lot of character, but then struggles with a lot of the gore, and then also struggles with giving those characters a story. You know?
Yeah. So it makes I'm just saying, even though the Prowler is mediocre at best, and is a little bit of a nostalgia with the Vaseline, the lens, and all that stuff, it makes it look like a masterpiece.
Yeah, I would say at this point, just being objective, I would say the Burning, the Prowler, Prom Night. Doesn't mean I didn't like have some things to love about this movie, but it's very much a guilty pleasure. I accept it as such. It's a bad movie that I kind of enjoy.
But yeah, it's, you know, well, Hollywood tells us we have to have a shower scene. So
yeah, Hollywood tells us we have to enjoy this movie.
All three of those movies have a shower scene, right?
That being said, though, I do think not having seen the sequels, I can't compare any of the sequels. I do think the original Prom Night is still way better than the incredibly dull Prom Night remake.
It's better than Demon Seed.
It's better than Demon Seed. Yeah. But have you seen the Prom Night remake?
No. Oh, yes.
It's one of those movies that it somehow finds a way to be even duller.
It's glossy dull.
Yeah.
It's like gloss and dull.
They find a way to misuse Idris Elba in that remake.
And if you go back, I think it's a crewman on the set that there's a shot in the hallway. I think a guy
Yes.
on a set, like, oh my god, and he goes into a room.
It's
And-
like the Hanging Munchkin in Wizard of Oz, where it's like a legend almost.
Yeah.
But it's weird, yeah. It's a worse movie in every way than this movie that already isn't that great. And this is a movie that I would say is a perfect opportunity for a remake because it does so many things not well, but it has an interesting, it's got an interesting idea to it.
All right, you said it's dolled up, but this is dolled up.
Dolled up.
And part 2 is like dolled up with lip gloss, and it's still bad. Yeah.
Oh, man.
So, have you seen Prom Night, everybody?
Yeah, let us know your thoughts down below. Have you seen the other Prom Night movies or the remake? Which one is
Part
your
2
preference?
is awesome. Yeah.
See, you tweeted about part 2 like a year ago, and that was when I was like, got the nestling in my head. We got to talk about part 1 at some point.
Part 2 with Lucy. Yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah, let us know your thoughts down below on the original Prom Night, the sequels, the remake, Jamie Lee Curtis's time in horror in the early 80s. We would like to hear about all of it. What are your thoughts on the film? Let us know down below. And like Nick pointed out, we got that Instagram, we got that Twitter, and you know what? We also got that Patreon. And Nick is not having a Starbucks today. He's drinking his own coffee. And if you sacrifice $1 Starbucks a month, you can join the Patreon and then be part of our rotation of picks that we get to do. We get monthly picks from our patrons. That is fantastic, and we like having those different voices involved as well. So consider looking at the Patreon down
Hey,
below.
sneak peek, our next episode, we're talking about a guy who loves to drink coffee.
Oh.
A director who loves to drink coffee. There you go.
And he'll probably sacrifice one to support local.
Yeah, he loves artists. That's what he said. If you're an artist, I'm your friend. So.
Fair enough. Yeah. So from all of us here at Kyle and Nick on Film, you can find my film reviews at GoFilmReviews.com.
You can find my podcast, the St. Paul Filmcast, where I interview filmmakers from the Twin Cities anywhere you find podcasts.
All right. Enjoy your prom. Don't get murdered, and we'll see you next time.